Hey, good evening, everybody. We're recovering from a severe electrical storm about 30 minutes ago, and when that happens, I disconnect everything and we just do a timeout here. I was hoping to get a little bit of thunder and show you some of the storm, but not when it gets that bad. We have to kind of delay things, and that's what was heading this way. That was looking to the northeast, and that huge base on the left side, you see that there, that developed a very large 60 to 65 dBz core pretty quickly, and that gave us some very strong clouded ground strikes there. And anyway, outside right now, where's my outside camera? Let's look at that. Yep, you can see the rain coming down. The lightning, yep, there's a little bit of thunder there. So, yeah, there is a little bit of thunder remaining. Anyway, we're going to see more of that this week as Harvey comes up. And let's look at the charts and see what we got going on. Okay, all this rain, this is being caused by a cold front working its way in from the north, which is kind of an unseasonably cool pattern for this time of year. See, normally we have a southerly gradient, and you probably remember this from last year. South winds we normally see in the central prairie provinces. Let me see if I can get to that. Yeah, here's the national map here. So normally what we see this time of year is kind of a lee side trough, especially up in Montana and the Canadian prairies. So we get this very deep, long southerly flow, and we tend to be under the influence of the Bermuda High off to the east, and that's usually kind of ridging into Georgia and Mississippi, Alabama, kind of in this area right here. And I'm sure Ryan and some of those other people on the East Coast, they're very familiar with that. So the flow kind of comes around from the coast like that. But what we have is we're being dominated by Canadian high pressure coming in from the north. So that's kind of a wintry weather pattern there. So what we see here is a cold front extending across much of the southern U.S., kind of like that. And we can see on the left side of the plot there, you can see the front coming around in the higher elevations and a little bit of thunderstorm activity there in Albuquerque as it comes through. And even there at Guadalupe Pass, you can see northeast winds. And that's a very good indicator there at Guadalupe Pass. They're up at about, I forgot exactly, maybe 8,000 feet maybe. And that sample is the mid-levels, the bottom of the mid-levels of the atmosphere. So if you're in doubt whether there's a frontal passage, you can often check the winds there and see exactly what's going on. Typically it's either out of the west, like you see with the plots right there, or it's out of the northeast. So obviously we have had frontal passage there at Guadalupe Peak. Okay, on the other charts, let's see what we have going on. There's those storms there, southeast of Dallas. Nationwide, almost mentioned that insurance slogan, nationwide is on your side. But yeah, nationally, what we're seeing here, if I can get to it, yeah, there we go. You can see how the high pressure is kind of dominating the Midwest and the central U.S. right there, and pushing all the action to the south and to the west. And we do have a little bit of thunderstorm activity there in far eastern North Carolina. Some very strong cells moving through that area. But other than that, and the monsoons in Arizona, pretty quiet. Let's take a look there at Harvey. We've got that coming across the Yucatan. And let's see here. This is what it looked like yesterday. So you can kind of see how the friction has kind of disrupted the circulation there. And you see the bands there on the east and north quadrants right there. And then for today, the system kind of reemerged down into the Bay of Campeche. And then we've seen a little bit of regeneration there. Yeah, there's a better satellite view. So starting to fill in with more convection there. And we're expecting this to possibly reach hurricane strength as it approaches the Texas coast. For now, we're expecting tropical storm force winds in that cell, or in that system. And we're expecting that to kind of move northeastward or northwestward towards Texas. There's a lot of disagreement there on the tracks there, and some of the better dynamical models have kind of shifted that a little bit further west. So we may be looking at a track more towards Corpus Christi or even towards Brownsville into San Antonio. So that'll be for this weekend. Here's the NHC forecast. You can see Harvey here. Tropical depression is at 7 p.m. 35 knots, sustain, 1003 millibars. So it's not much of a storm right now, but of course we are expecting that development there. And there's the forecast tracks. And the trend has been for that to kind of shift westward a little bit. Okay, let me see if I can bring up some satellite data. Guess I'll get the thickness product started up and get that loaded there. Today's show had to be done kind of in a rush because of the storm there. And we're starting to see the darkness starting to take more of an effect on our chart sequence here. So remember, a month ago we would see nice daylight, lots of visible imagery, and now we're starting to look at a lot more darkness here on the images. But it gives us a chance to look at some of the overshooting tops, like that one cell right there near Pueblo, Walsenburg, Colorado. And looks like the monsoon is pretty active out there in Arizona. Lots of convective cloud coverage in this area here. And you can kind of see how that contributed to the cloud problems in Kansas and Missouri, parts of Missouri, the far northwest at least. The monsoon activity in this region earlier during the week, Saturday and Sunday, caused all of these anvil clouds to get lofted northeastward, and that deepening low height system that we saw out to the west kind of pushed all those to the northeast and caused viewing problems there. Okay. Yeah, let's look at some infrared imagery. We haven't done that in a while. That'll give us a good chance to look at both the monsoon and Harvey, because infrared imagery is really what's important for letting you see the cold cloud tops in these tropical systems here, because with visible imagery you're kind of having to cut through a lot of cirrus and cirrostratus. Yeah, like the majority of this is mostly cirriform cloud, and it's very hard to really pick out what's going on underneath. So that's where infrared imagery really helps us out. So, for example, you can see the colder overshooting tops here and the colder towers here, developing right there north of the Yucatan and out in the Gulf. And when we see those colder anvil areas start to expand in coverage, that tells us that there's convective strengthening in that system, and that can mean a release of latent heat. And when there's release of latent heat over a broad area from multiple cells, that'll drop the central pressure of the storm as a whole and result in deepening. So that's where the pressure falls in a hurricane tend to come from. So we like to keep a very close eye on the convection that we see within those storms there. Okay, let me take a look at chat here. We've got, 24 people in. Andrew here and Sue M. little bit of discussion going on. And I probably can't read all of these. I'm seeing a huge amount of chat in here, but we got White House. Welcome to the program here, talking about super hurricane over 50 feet. Yeah, I don't know if you're talking about Harvey there. We're not quite expecting a hurricane on that, but if there's something going on out in the Pacific, I may not know about that. Weather show postponed due to weather. Yep. Carl Berghoff made it in tonight, and I've got Ryan here. And Ryan sent some photos, and I've still got to sort through those. I've been going through a huge backlog of orders because we had book boxes coming in today and back orders, and I had to get those out. So that kind of kept me pretty busy and off of email. But I'm going to be going through that tonight. Spammer in the chat room. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Hang on a second. We'll take care of that. All right. Thank you, Carl and gang, for letting me know about that. And I'm continuing to go through the chat here. Ron having some interesting weather today. Alexei had a storm roll through earlier that stayed most of the afternoon. It's finally moved on now. Carl Berghoff uploaded some new pictures. I appreciate that. Alexei saying ignore the troll. Yeah, that's definitely a very good idea. The trolls, we're going to get that as the channel tends to grow. Best thing to do is just ignore them because it's the attention that they want. And I've got a couple people in here that are doing moderation. I think just one person right now, but they'll be taking care of things as the channel grows here. Nothing from the eclipse over Minnesota from Carl. Yeah, bad. Sorry to hear that. I know it was a problem in Kansas City too, and possibly even in St. Joseph, and they were talking up St. Joseph being a big draw for eclipse watchers. Okay, scrolling through the chat here. Let's see here. This is what I'm looking at. And I can kind of see the stream health down at the bottom. Well, we got 30 people here. So let me go through this quickly so we don't go through, so we don't bore you all, because I just can't read all these. Picture of a bald eagle in Carl's spruce trees. Outstanding. Pretty decent amount of rain caused an aerial flood advisory from Alexei. Quiet in Indiana from Fred there. Carl catching up on weathercasts. Fred up there in North Dakota, a few 30s in northern Minnesota this morning. Yeah, maybe we can take a look at that. Let's do that. And if you want to get to this, a good place to go to for these DIFAX graphics are, you can go to Colorado State DIFAX, like that. And then it'll bring up the Colorado State DIFAX map archive. And they've got a very good daily minimum temperature product that's got the official lows from federal observing sites. And all you have to do is scroll down to the date that you want to look at. And today is the 23rd. And there it is. There's the minimum temperatures for this morning. Look at that, 89 for a low in Phoenix. That does tend to be normal during the warm season, 89 in this area here, 83 in Vegas. But up to the north, let's see here. Let's see, we're seeing 45 at Grand Forks. Yeah, 30s, those would probably be locally at some of the co-op stations. But the federal sites, I'm just cross-checking the date there. Yeah, the coldest temperature I can find in the lower 48 looks like 43 just west of International Falls, 42 up north of Grand Forks, and 42 at Aberdeen. So kind of a nice way to start off late summer here. Landfall August 24th, 92, with a pressure reading at 924 millibars at Homestead. Talking about Hurricane Andrew there. UP of Michigan has a frost advisory tonight. And just scrolling through the rest of this, East Texas is going to get soaked. All right, let's go ahead and head into the charts here. And we'll take a look here. Okay, the long wave pattern. Well, 500 millibars is not a good chart for looking at the long waves, but it can be used for that purpose. The problem is it tends to be distorted a little bit by short waves and medium waves. So in other words, the field tends to be a little bit noisy. But we can kind of see a little bit of, for example, a long wave off the west coast. And possibly a little bit of a long wave on the east coast here, and you can see the big ridging in the Canadian prairies right there. So downstream from that ridge, we're going to start seeing a return to warm weather possibly starting tomorrow. And I'm kind of surprised with this ridge just upstream that we're seeing these cold temperatures. However, this is kind of a dry pattern downstream from these ridges. And of course, dry air means lower heat capacity, and that means you get stronger cooling at nighttime, better radiation. Here's the 250 millibar analysis. This is the upper air pattern. And let's see here. There's the big ridge over Alberta. And downstream from that, we've got pretty strong jet stream over Pennsylvania and upstate New York. Strongest winds. Looks like maybe 70, 80 knots. Pittsburgh, Wilmington, and Detroit there. Just taking a break there to let y'all listen to thunder. I'm sure some of you up in the Northeast and the Pacific Northwest especially probably don't get to hear much of that. But we can see here in Texas, there's not much upper air support for these storms. See the very weak winds at 200 millibars. This is the 200 millibar chart, which is 40,000 feet, just under 40,000 feet. So what we're seeing here is kind of like the top of the troposphere. And we only see winds here of 15 knots, which means the storms are not very well ventilated. They tend to build, rise, and just collapse on themselves. And we end up with just kind of multicellular structures. Okay, so there's one last look at the upper air pattern. Then let's look at the moisture. And from what I remember, the number in the lower left, that's, I believe, the dew point depression. And we can tell that's dew point depression because we go out to Phoenix. For example, do we see dew points of 20 Celsius or 68 Fahrenheit? No way. So looking out to the deserts and looking at the values, that'll help you kind of clarify what you're looking at. So what we're seeing here, this is dew point depression. It's basically the difference between the temperature and the dew point. The lower the dew point depression, the more humid the air. So it's very closely related to relative humidity. In values over 5 Celsius are close to about 70% relative humidity. For example, right here in the Florida Panhandle, that 5 right there, that's going to be about 70% relative humidity, and that's where we start to see development of cloud material, anything 5 or below. So here in Arkansas and Tennessee this morning, very high likelihood at clouds at 850 millibars here. See, this is 850 millibars or 5,000 feet. I'm trying to figure out why my drawing tool isn't working. All right, let's see what's going on with my drawing tool. think, yeah, there it goes. Okay, so I was just trying to write 5,000 for you guys. So 850 millibars is 5,000 feet. It's good to memorize those two if you're going to do any forecasting, because that'll really help you out and be able to tell what level you're looking at. All right, I think we're about ready to head into some of the forecast data. And before we do that, we'll take a quick look at the synoptic scale picture. And you can see that we're dominated by this large high centered over Manitoba. So there's that very large polar high. And so we get this kind of a cold dome spreading over the central U.S. And the leading edge of the cold front looks like it's something like that right there. And then we got a little bit of an occluded front there in Quebec. So the main area of cold air advection, that's going to be right in this area right here over the Great Lakes. And we've got a warm air advection pattern setting up in the Dakotas. And that's downstream from that upper level ridge that's in this area right here. And then west of the upper level ridge, that's an area of more warm air advection. And that's out in advance of this next system coming on shore. So probably the patterns are looking something like that right there. Okay, so now that we got a pretty good idea what's going on, we can kind of figure out that maybe we're just going to see the high clearing out a lot of these storms down to the south, pushing everything out in the Gulf. And then down to the south, we're going to be seeing Harvey moving on in and kind of linking up with this area of southerly return flow getting established. Because as that ridge right there moves to the southeast, we're going to start developing this southerly flow here in Texas, and that'll just kind of, I'm not going to say it's going to suck the system on up to the north because there may be a bit of blocking there, but the general tendency is going to be for that to kind of drift northward, at least initially. Okay, let's look at some of the forecast products, and here's the mesoscale forecast looking at the high resolution rapid refresh. There's the storms there in east and central Texas, pushing to the south and dissipating by 2 or 3 in the morning. Lots of convection continuing over Albuquerque and maybe around the Santa Fe area right there, maybe southeast of Klein's Corner down into the El Paso and Las Cruces area. So that'll be going on overnight and probably dissipated by tomorrow morning. And you can see the ridging pushing into Texas here, higher pressure up to the north with northerly winds bringing some dry air down into Texas. Okay, let's look at the forecast here. And I think what I'm going to do is look at the NAM prediction as far as this hurricane goes. So we're loading up the NAM here. And we're going to get an idea of the forecast track. And of course we can also use the GFS forecast there and look at the dynamical prediction on that model. We'll go ahead and do that first. This is the GFS. This is the global model run by NOAA at Washington, D.C. And here comes Harvey coming up from the south. This is on Wednesday. Let me see if I can squeeze the date and time in here. Okay, so yeah, up here you can see the valid date and time. This is for Thursday evening. So tomorrow night for the webcast, we're going to see maybe a little bit of Harvey on the long-range radar from Brownsville. But other than that, no real effects, just northerly flow coming into the southern U.S. And then for Friday, things get a little more interesting. We've got Harvey coming into the Corpus Christi area. And we can see some of the spiral bands starting to come on shore there. Then for Saturday, GFS is bringing the system inland. Very slow movement, so we're going to see some good potential for flooding rains here. Places like Victoria and Beeville, maybe Corpus Christi, Port Aransas, and even San Antonio there. Then for Sunday night, center of the circulation is just south of San Antonio near the Cotulla area, and you can see some of the spiral bands continuing to work inland, and you can kind of see this southeasterly gradient. So that's bringing in some tropical moisture into the circulation, and that's a lot of moisture for the system to work with, so plenty of ingredients there for convection. And then on the south side around Brownsville, you can kind of see the dry air advection coming in the south side. And then for Monday, there's Monday night, just kind of an open wave around Brownsville. And then we get another system approaching the Carolina coast, and that's the other storm. Let me back this up. Yep, there's a little tropical disturbance there moving across Florida, crossing, and then moving out into the Atlantic Ocean by Saturday and Sunday. Pretty much blocked by this large upper-level high, or this large surface high over the northeast U.S. Other than that, pattern's pretty quiet across the U.S. itself. Okay, then you see a little bit of regeneration around Corpus Christi Wednesday and Thursday, and then the other system along the northeast coast, we see some development with that. And that looks like it does have a little baroclinicity. You can see the thickness lines there, kind of crossing through that system. And this is what they called back in the 70s a neuter cane, which is kind of a weird term. Neuter, N-E-U-T-E-R, cane. And I forgot who came up with that one, but the Weather Service held on to that term for maybe like 8 or 10 years, and then dropped it. But that was kind of like the term for kind of a hybrid hurricane that had kind of features of tropical circulation with temperature advection. I guess maybe they thought that term was kind of confusing to the public, but that's kind of what the system is, and you can see it moving up to the northeast, transitioning to kind of a baroclinic system. And there it is, heading up to the Canadian Maritimes on Thursday and Friday. And we're continuing to deal with the remains of Harvey right there. Next weekend, Thursday and Friday, a week from now. And then that's finally out of the picture, September 2nd and 3rd. And then we get the next cold front come down. Look at that. That's a good blast of cold air coming in September 3rd. Very unusual for this time of year. And let's see what the NAM had for a predicted forecast, and then we'll look at the European. Okay, NAM forecast. Here's Harvey coming up from the south. This is tomorrow night when we do the webcast. You can see it southeast of Brownsville, so that matches up with the GFS. Then for Friday night when we do the webcast, it's going to be southeast of Corpus Christi, approaching Port Aransas and Port Lavaca. And it looks like that makes landfall, according to the NAM, near Port Lavaca. There it is, coming on shore Saturday night. Maybe kind of a tropical storm or maybe a weak hurricane. More likely a tropical storm due to the frictional effects. But there it is. And that's as far as the NAM goes. That's the 84-hour point. And then here's this other system. Look at that. NAM going for a little deepening. This is Friday in Florida. Then this is going even further back. You can kind of see the circulation there off Tampa Thursday morning, tomorrow morning. And there it goes. You can see it spinning right there over Florida. And then when it crosses over to the Atlantic side on Friday night, we see deepening there. just north of Titusville, Cape Kennedy up to Jacksonville. And there it is off Jacksonville on Saturday night, deepening, so possible tropical storm there for this weekend. And let's go to the European model. We definitely don't get very much data from the Europeans, which really chafes me because it kind of goes against the spirit of scientific cooperation and understanding, and also, this is very good for, I don't want to get on a rant here, but, having all this model data and radar data, this is you've seen what this does for the U.S. as far as innovation and private industry, but over there it's all locked away. But we do have some important fields here from the European model. So this is helpful. So this is Friday night, and you can see the European model going for a very westward track up through Brownsville Friday, and then up through Corpus Christi, very far inland, and out towards San Antonio by Sunday morning. And then we see a little bit of propagation of the system back to the southeast, maybe a little bit of intensification of the convection offshore, so that ends up kind of transitioning the system off to the southeast. And then we see redevelopment there off Port Aransas and Port Lavaca there Tuesday and Wednesday. And then 979 millibar system making landfall once again south of Beaumont. So there's Tuesday morning and there's Wednesday morning according to the European model. So that's another possible solution there. And for the northeast U.S., looks like a much different outcome. You can see that over Florida. Look at that. Remember how Florida, we were looking for kind of like a tropical storm off the Carolinas? Well, there's that system right there. Okay, that's Saturday morning. Maybe kind of a tropical depression right there. Okay, then for Sunday, okay, we get a little bit of deepening off of Vero Beach there. And for Monday, a little bit of very slow deepening. And then that moves up the coast and then recurves out to sea like that, kind of as a weak hurricane or strong tropical storm. And then this thing coming from the remains of Harvey bolts across the northeast U.S. and that's probably a baroclinic system there. So we're probably going to see a good cold front with that and a good slug of cold air advection coming in south behind that. So which outcome we have, I really don't know. There's no way to tell. We can just wait it out and see what happens with the initial landfall there this weekend. Okay, let's see. That's probably about all I've got here. Let me take one last look at chat here, and I'm going to have to copy this and look at it later. Sagan's Run, located on the east side of a small hill, got great drainage there. Sagan's Run, I think, yeah, you're down in, yeah, you're close to this thing. I believe you're south of Victoria or southwest of Victoria. That's going to be right in the path of Harvey. But if we do have like a very strong landfall, like a strong tropical storm or weak hurricane, we will be doing some special coverage here. And it may be a special event, possibly for the Patreon donors, but I haven't quite worked that out yet. We'll just have to see. Okay, Sagan's Run, only 20 inches of rain so far, so yeah, they're looking forward to this, I would imagine. Claudette in 2003 and 2004 had a lot of wind. And Florida under heavy rain right now every few hours with passing storms coming off the Atlantic. That's an update there from Ryan. Big trough with a tropical wave in Florida mixing up with heavy moisture piling up the storms across the South Florida region. Let's see if we can take a quick look at that before we go. I'm switching over to NHC. And let's see. Not much going on right now. Looks like maybe a few weak storms off the coast. Let me switch over to the radar. I'm going to go down to the Miami radar. Okay, so we're loading up Miami here with GR level 2. Of course, that's a good radar program, and a bunch of different options here for looking at products. And you can also look at sites even in Korea. So you can see Camp Humphreys and Kunsan there in that table there. Okay, so yeah, just a few weak showers there, some of them moving through the Florida Keys, and we'll see that start ramping up over the next day or two as this next depression comes together. Okay, well, that's about all I got for tonight. Got a lot of catch-up work to do here, and I appreciate you all joining. I like seeing the 26 people in here tonight, and we'll be doing coverage of Harvey and the system coming across Florida, so hopefully y'all will join us. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we will see you tomorrow night. Take care and have a good evening.